Hello and welcome. This is 3901. That's the name of the episode. That's how many days I've been doing this, Josh. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Josh, getting started today, and there's a lot to talk about because we kind of missed out last week, and it's a big catch-up of what's going on around the world and just trying to position, perspective. Look, I'm receiving a lot of praise and at the same time a lot of criticism for what we talk about on this show. And I don't know if it's because people bring their own biases to the table. And it is kind of hard when you are playing in a news cycle that is about deception. And what I mean by that is that over the weekend or over the past few days, we've learned at the Washington Post, for example, massive layoffs, the boss walking out, etc., having to resign. And then I read in the Gateway Pundit today that the excuse is that they didn't go hard enough on Donald Trump. Now, if that's what we're up against, right, so they're saying that if we'd gone harder, we wouldn't be laying off people, we wouldn't have gone broke. Well, it's entirely not true. And that's the point of where we're going. Now, the big thing here amongst, let's say, anti-establishment types is that there is the belief, well, true or not, that Israel has meddled so much in what's going on here that I saw on one of my own Telegram pages that I've operated for 6 years, somebody put something on there that was completely vile and suggesting that that the man who committed the Holocaust, and people will now deny that, was right in what he did back then based on what they read in the Epstein files. Well, I'm sorry to say, but if you think that, you just get out right now. Just go away. You don't need to be watching this. And if you want to leave comments, leave them, and I'll just annihilate you in the comments like people say that I do too much of. But I just can't understand how you can think that Jeffrey Epstein represents the Jewish people. That's the first thing. And how you think that any rogue government represents any people. Does Anthony Albanese represent me as an Australian? Does Susan Lee, does David Littleproud, for example, represent me as an Australian? That's the reason why I'm in politics, for goodness sake, is because they don't represent me. But to sort of tar people with that brush to say that the Jewish people, for example, are the same as an Epstein is just such an ignorant, stupid thing to say. And ignorant, stupid people will say stupid things. And I don't know what this whole thing is about, right? Going back 6 years, we'd put a video up on COVID and 250,000 people would watch it. 6 years later, 250 people watch it. So I don't quite know what the purpose is of what we are doing here, except to be able to provide a perspective, a much needed perspective. And just a couple of days ago, Donald Trump came out and said that they're working on a massive new platform for independent journalists, and it'll be a great thing. So are we meant to be here, Josh? Are we meant to be doing what we're doing? Are we just pushing forward because we're just grifters trying to make $50 a week extra, to pay our bills? Or are we doing this because we actually give a damn? And that's the part. I'm going to throw to you for your comments, and then I'm going to read something that I wrote the other day, and I think it might be relevant to what's really going on. But what do you think about that, and how are you getting criticism and praise in your work?
Well, first and foremost, I have a famous quote in A to Z Quotes. And that quote is, I would rather be loved by millions or hated by the same amount. I don't want to be moderately liked and accepted by everyone, because who wants to be milquetoast? I mean, if you don't have the passion of your convictions, then why speak out at all? If you're just going to sound like everybody else and be an echo chamber, well, you're not going to gain an audience from that, number one. Number two, no one's going to respect you. And number three, you're not going to have consistency, because when someone does that, they're constantly changing their positions all the time. As far as, Epstein and Jewish people and things like that, look, I'll be the first to say, as someone who is Jewish, 100% both parents, I absolutely despise liberal Jews, because I think that they have added so much negativity towards the overall discussion on Israel and the Jewish people. And what they have done essentially is they have given a bad name or a bad mark for the good Jews, for the ones that actually do the right things and don't do the Bernie Madoffs and the Jeffrey Epsteins and the Rahm Emanuels and the Harvey Weinsteins and all these scumbags and Bernie Sanders, right? These people don't represent the majority of conservative Jews like myself. And so I've been critical. I've been hard on them many, many times. And as far as what we do for a living, I always say this, because a lot of people ask me, they go, Josh, how do you do this? How do you cover these negative stories in and out every single day? I mean, obviously in the Trump administration, in the Trump years, hopefully I'm covering much more good than bad, but there is still bad because they're trying to attack the good now, where it was we were in the minority and we were attacking the bad constantly, right? And so that's where I think we fit in to the discussion for both countries, for that matter, because we're willing to go and say the things that are counter to the regular narrative that the establishment speak usually agrees with.
And that might be a part of it, that everyone who's been following along for one reason or another, and you stand up and you do it because you do have something to say that nobody else is saying.
Not
It creates.
for the money.
Yeah, that's right, and certainly
Neither
not.
one of
And
us.
but you do it because there is a niche in there that's being missed out. But of course, what happens is that people form their own bias, and I've talked about this ad nauseum over the years. And then what they do is they then follow those that speak publicly the closest about what they believe in, and that's what happens. And then you form these sort of miniature silos, etc. The other night, the movie American Made came on to the television, and it just sparked. I'd seen the film before, and it just sparked something in my head. And I thought, America, like the movie American Made, I wrote, was partly because America is both considered to be the world cop, and therefore as the world cop, it's also about what they can get away with, hence what we saw in that movie. And therefore what their friends thought that they could get away with in the process of maintaining the power of being world cop. And so there are those that don't like it, wanted it set up like, say, for example, the United Nations, which was another form of a world cop, a toothless tiger nonetheless. Mm-hmm. But when the United Nations does what the United States has done, which is to perhaps, let's call it the old United States, is to cheat or get their way, it becomes the Wild West, and that's where we are. And I say that because we know of how many horrible crimes United Nations has been linked to in relation to abuse of women, etc., sexual abuse, etc., young women, underage women. It's horrific.
Not only that, but an organization attached to the United Nations hid nine of the October 7th massacre attackers in safe houses. And by the way, that organization also endorsed Mondani in New York. So look, President Trump right now is pushing the administration here to pay back debts to the United Nations. Not because he wants to be in their good graces, not because he wants to do that to satisfy these globalist idiots. He's doing it, in my opinion, because he's going to shut it down, and you're going to have the Board of Peace take its place. So I think what he's doing is he's cutting ties, just like the great Pete Hegseth and the Secretary of War has recently done with Harvard. He said, we're looking for warriors, not wokesters. And so I think a lot of that type of mentality and thought process is going into a lot of these different things.
Well, what you get is a situation whereby if you have corruption at the top of the old United States pre-Trump, you have corruption at the top of the United Nations, and then you have corruption involved in those manipulating other countries around the world, or in fact the enemies of the United States. So you just have a Wild West. And when you have international organisations above, or let's say not officially above, but like the UN is meant to be, given that sort of that overarching field that you kind of just voluntarily sign up to, like the WHO, you then get a scenario that these organisations, these institutions represent their own interests before those they're meant to serve first. And what it means is that you end up having a scenario where the people who you are meant to represent, you treat like your chattels, and they become cattle. And of course, we saw that during COVID and the willingness of some to go along with said leadership. And there were others that said, well, no, I'm not going to go along with that, and then were punished soundly because of it. But if you are in a scenario like that and you become subservient, that's where the problem lies. However, we often will say things like, well, we can't be too hard on someone who, for example, took a jab because they thought they were doing the right thing. However, maybe they should have listened to those that was just saying, look, maybe you need to consider this, but of course they weren't. And then it comes down to credibility. And that's what a lot of this is about credibility. Now, in today's show, we're going to talk about Savannah Guthrie, and that's going to lead us into Q, it's going to lead us into Epstein, and it's going to lead us into Pizzagate. And of course, that all comes down to credibility. And I'm going to show you some things today that are going to tell you that for those that are going, yeah, I know, I was right, I was a Q person, a Pizzagate person, whatever, and I was right. Well, now let's see where the mainstream narrative is going, because it doesn't matter how much you think you know. Unless your neighbours on both sides of where you live also agree with you, it's meaningless. And that's the problem, that we've become these silos. So, Josh, before we get there today, what I want to do for our Australian viewers that are probably watching at my end is I just want to give you two big stories that have popped up. This is the first one, very quickly. This is an Oz poll that was conducted yesterday based on Newspoll. ALP 33%, somehow it's gone up 1%. One Nation Party 27%, up 5%. The Libs at 15%, the Nationals at 3%, the Greens at 12%, and others at 10%. Now, Lib and Nat adding up to 18%. That's the coalition. That's the former government of Australia at 18%. And the third party, the leading third party, One Nation, at 27%. Those numbers are massive. And of course, it all comes down to Pauline Hanson's position on immigration, certainly not on economics, but on immigration. And that means that there is a threat against the people here in Australia, believing that there are too many people coming into the country that are adding fuel to the fire. Now, there will be the deniers, and there are always the deniers. There are always people out there. For example, there was a story that popped up at the weekend that someone was telling me about, that there was a whole lot of crime going on in a certain part of Australia. And rather than, and for example, it was people overdosing in the streets of Newcastle. There were, needles in alleyways near the main road, everywhere, etc. And the council came out to do a news story to say that there was no problem. And whilst they were shooting it on the news, a person was overdosing behind them, and they had to stop the record. That's the example of the ignorance that's...
the summer of love, when they say they're mostly peaceful protests. Meanwhile, there's cars being blown up behind the guy on CNN. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's why we call them prostitutes.
This is the problem that we have. Now, is there a housing problem in Australia? Well, of course there's a housing problem. But Josh, let me just give you an example. There is an inner city suburb of Newtown in Sydney. It's a couple of kilometres from the CBD. It is a very old suburb, of course, but everything is micro in terms of size, terrace houses, etc. Very, very close, but very expensive. But it was only ever a working class suburb. But because of proximity, it gets more and more expensive. But it doesn't mean that living there is anything great. It's just how close you are to the CBD. Check this out that happened at the weekend. A driveway in the Sydney suburb of Newtown sold for $1.25 million to a developer.
Just
Look
the
at that.
driveway?
Just the driveway. What you can see right there, a sloped driveway heading to a garage at the back, which is like a shed. That's it there. And here's the copy from the story. A driveway in the inner city suburbs sold for $1.25 million, $250,000 above the advertised price guide. The 4-metre wide block of land in Newtown is just 110 square metres, which is 1,100 square feet. And at present includes a shed and a carport, and the listing described as a ready-to-build block and a golden opportunities in a blue chip setting, only suitable for low density residential zoning. Not that you could put a block of units on it, you couldn't, it wouldn't fit. But that's an example.
So
there.
is that someone that wants to clear out the rest of the space and build a house on it? Is that why
that's what it would be used for? But 110 square metres, you couldn't build on the entire. It's very, very small.
Tight.
And of course, it's only it's 4 metres is 16 feet wide, I think that's what it is, maybe 15 feet wide, to give you an idea. Wow. That's just what the width of one room. So you put a front door in there, and that room can only be a couple of metres wide. It's ridiculous. But so you can see why One Nation is getting 27% support based just on immigration, because people see where that problem is. You can't keep adding people into a system that doesn't have any infrastructure and then piling them back into the cities. If you want to bring people in, build more roads, build more homes, spread it out, decentralised, build very fast rail, all of these things. But of course, you can't do that overnight in 1 year. That's a 25-year plan. And then you can say, well, in 10 years' time, we're going to do this. We're going to build nuclear power plants. We're going to build this infrastructure. We're going to build crop farms, etc. We're going to grow. And then we can bring you in, and it'll be the land of opportunity. Now, isn't it interesting that the one person that seems to be creating a land of opportunity around the world is himself President Trump in the United States, who is insisting that before all of this stuff that we're going to get to, the dirty news, the bad news, the stuff that's going to bring about finally the collapse of the old system, he's making opportunity in your country starting from young people. And I'm going to give you this good news story to follow, and this I think is the best one. Then we're going to get into all the hard news today. Given that it's Super Bowl Sunday in the United States, this is what's going to be launched today.
Dear America.
If I start investing when I'm 16?
9, 7. It could change my future. All our future. I want to be a nurse.
Go to college.
Be a businesswoman. I can save for a house with a trampoline. 2 trampolines. This year, every American child gets an investment account. And millions will be pre-funded. That's free money. We can all expand the American dream. Sign me up.
I absolutely love this. I reached out to the Trump administration and Trump directly, like on Truth, and I told him, make this a center point for your State of the Union address. People need to know this. I can't tell you how many people I talked to this weekend that had little children, and I took it upon myself, like at Costco and other places, to say, hey, do you know, are you planning on having more children? And the lady said, yeah, as a matter of fact, maybe in a year or two. Well, you understand now that child born in 2026 and up for now on will get money, right? No, I didn't know that. So I'm really glad that they're taking it a step further and introducing it to not just the people that will be watching the State of the Union address, and of course half the country is probably going to tune out, right? Because they hate the president. Independents usually always do, either way, and of course MAGA's going to do it. But reaching the Super Bowl, reaching the people that are going to be watching the most watched thing on television and talking about the baby accounts, I can assure you President Trump's numbers are going to shoot up 2-3 percentage points, maybe even 4 percentage points in real numbers within the next 2 weeks, just based on that alone. And one more thing I'll add to this, this will create people that love capitalism. These children are going to see their accounts grow over time. And as they get older and they learn about math and they learn about investments and things like that, hopefully schools are still teaching it, they're going to say, wow, look at what the market has done for me. Look at what has happened when I've invested early. And these are going to be future capitalists, which is going to make more conservative Republican voters, hopefully.
Tony Abbott, the former Liberal leader who became Prime Minister, campaigned and defeated Kevin Rudd, which was also Julia Gillard. They sort of swapped Prime Ministers there for a while, based on a promise that he said would lower the electricity bill by $5 a week. Fast forward a decade, and Anthony Albanese did the same thing. He campaigned on your electricity bill being reduced by $275, and he won office and then won office again. Ironically, that never happened either, and yet he won office. So there is no question that a very small $5 a week promise will prompt somebody to vote for you. So for all of the Epsteining and crime and COVID and lockdown and forced vaccination and digital ID and all of these other things, $5 a week is what makes the people decide what they're going to do. So if you can promise somebody,
vote based on this.
That's right. So if you can promise somebody that they're going to start with a bank account, and the number one reason when we had our branch meeting last week at People First that people joined the party was that they wanted to do something to help their children because they knew how hard it was for them to get into a home. That was the reason why. So they're getting into politics because of money. Politics is making them vote the right based on money, but then of course this comes along, so it's obvious this is going to work. Now at the same time, Josh, last week the Reserve Bank of Australia put our interest rates up 1/4 percentage point after the US has gone down 1/4 percentage point because our inflation levels are too high, and that's because our treasurer keeps spending money and his Prime Minister keeps importing more people, and they're basically pouring fuel onto the fire. It is demand-sided, and that's the problem. And so the Australian people, again, are suffering. Now, here's another thing that the Australian Treasurer is talking about in the lead up to the federal budget. What he wants to do now, based on pressure apparently from the Australian Council of Trade Unions, the ACTU, he wants to reduce the capital gains discount when an investor sells a property or a crypto asset or a share or something like that. There used to be a 50% discount on the capital gain. So in other words, let's say you buy something for $500,000 in the past and in the future you sell it for $1 million. That $500,000 is subject to capital gains tax. The way that the government would tax that currently is that you would get a 50% discount, so the declared profit would be $250,000, and then you would add that onto your income for that year. Let's say you earn $100,000, you would now be paying tax on $350,000, right? Based on the gain of $500,000. That's how you calculate your capital gains.
Highway robbery.
But what Chalmers wants to do, because now this is why they are such manipulating bastards, these cunning people. He says it's because we don't have enough housing stock that what we're going to do, like, work this relation out. He then says we're going to reduce, or we're thinking about reducing the discount from 50% to 25%. So in other words, that $500,000 gain that you have to pay tax on 250, you're now only going to have to pay tax on 375. So they get a bigger chunk. So Chalmers and Albo, what are you going to do with the extra 30 or 40 grand that you get off these people? Are you going to go build a home and give it to an immigrant or give it to an Australian? Or are you just going to put it back in a consolidated revenue and keep spending like drunken sailors? Do you see the detachment there? So they're going to punish investors by declaring we're going to attack the rich because that suits their voter base. But not one of the people that's paying rent, who now are there less properties to rent. Isn't that interesting? Because the investors are forced to sell because they can't keep the tax or whatever they do, or eventually they bail, or they never sell, and it doesn't solve any of the problems. This is the big disaster with what's going on here. Instead of being able to say, and by the way, here's another one. They've got a 350,000 home target that they were meant to build. They haven't built 80,000 yet.
Wow.
So they're not building
Sounds
anyway.
like our light rail system in California, right?
Oh.
It's only been trying to be built for probably 30 years. And so there's a new ad out where they're mocking, I think it was on Breitbart, they're mocking Gavin, and they keep going back to the light rail and the light rail thing and the project and how it's just never been built, and they keep going back to it and back to it. It's actually really funny.
It's just devastating. Is the left-wing states in the United States just not achieving anything, and then you go and see other places and they're absolutely booming. So look, there's a lot to say. I feel like it's a real radio show today. Just having a real talk-back show. We just should get people calling into us.
Bunch more to go here.
Yeah, exactly. So look, let's now head over. I want to just touch on the whole Savannah Guthrie story, and I might just start it with another clip. This is very old that popped up over the weekend. Check this out.
She is full of kindness and knowledge. Talk to her and you'll see.
Catherine is very gentle and kind. Talk to her and you'll see.
So the comparison that comes...
It's creepy. Not only is it creepy, they've gone back not once, not twice, but now 3 times into Nancy Guthrie's house. That's number one. Number two, they also went into, not once but twice, her sister and brother-in-law's house, and they're still, I guess, investigating that. I mean, there's no question in my mind that this was an inside job. Somebody within this family did this. But here's my thought process. Why does anyone care? I mean, look, I don't want to see an 84-year-old woman suffer or possibly pass away because of what happened to her. That's not what I'm saying.
I'm
What
just
I
putting
am
Joe
saying
M on
is,
the screen. Says
what
the same
about
thing.
the 300,000 children that were child trafficked by the Auto Pen administration? Where's the outcry for them? Where's the outcry for the victims of illegal immigration? How many children are missing or go missing daily in the United States and anywhere else around the world? Why do we really care about this has-been broadcaster and her mother, to be quite honest? I mean, there's so many other things that we've got to worry about in the United States and in the country and everything else. We've got the thing going on with Iran. We've got so many other issues. We've got things going on here at home that we've got to take care of, like the SAVE Act. So to be quite honest, I don't really care about this at all, and I'm tired of seeing it on the television. And I'll make one more last point. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that Sean Hannity, who I can't stand, let's just say Sean Hannity's mother or father ends up missing and being kidnapped. Do you really think CNN and MSLSD or MS Now and ABC and NBC and CBS and all that would be spending this amount of time looking for Sean Hannity's father? No, they would not. And how do you know that? How much time did they spend on the assassination of Charlie Kirk? I rest my case.
Yeah, well said. Well, story, the plot thickens, right? Because you're absolutely right. Everyone's starting to wonder how this thing adds up, and it doesn't add up. Meanwhile, she gets the support of the president, who says, all the available assets, etc. But that video that we play was a comparison to the movie Silence of the Lambs, where it seems to be scripted, and that's part of what's going on. People saying we're watching a movie. This is just a quick one here. This is obviously from a Q post. Savannah Guthrie there mentioned, misspelt, which is also interesting. Various different characters who are being looked at for various different reasons. And then, of course, there was the story from way back in 2020. Trump again refuses to denounce QAnon. Well, it's not QAnon, it's Q, and that's part of it. But there was that stoush between the two of them where he basically denied it, and then said, hang on a second, somebody who's against pedophilia, is that a bad thing? And that was what was interesting. So what is that
it's
about?
Interesting that President Trump here is putting extra resources into trying to find the mother after how nasty Savannah Guthrie has been to Trump in the first administration and throughout. So again, would Hitler do that? Right? Would Hitler go out and spend all this extra, time and energy and resources on trying to find a political adversary's mother? I think not. It's ridiculous. Look, I hope she's okay. I don't have any ill feelings to her or anything like that. But I would say that I'm as interested in this Savannah Guthrie case as much as I want to watch, synchronized swimming competitions from Frog Balls, Kentucky.
There you go. And possibly even the Winter Olympics.
Which is just as bad.
And we're going to get on to that in a moment. Now, I want to just link a few things together, as I mentioned that I would. This has popped up in one of our leading tabloids, news.com.au, which is the Daily Telegraph in New South Wales. Pizzagate theory returns with the Epstein file release. The bizarre Pizzagate conspiracy theory, which peaked at Trump's first election, has returned after the Epstein files sparked fresh online speculation. Well, there were certainly reasons for that, because there was the Epstein email that suggested there was a torture video and then related it back to pizza, which is the CP, which is the term cheese pizza refers to, and I don't have to say it out loud, but those that know, but obviously to child abuse material, etc., which is completely and entirely unacceptable. And the more that this story goes on, the more stories come out. There is an horrific story that's popped up in Australia involving a network of satanic abusers, some of people in positions of trust, etc., and it expands to people who are working in businesses, in legitimate businesses, renting properties to people, educators, etc. Just vile that you would think this would go on. And I cannot believe so many people that are involved think that they're going to get away with carrying this digital information on their devices. I just can't understand how they're so brazen. And maybe they've got away with it for so long that that's what they think is just a normal thing to do. But at long last, they're getting caught. So it gets nasty. But Josh, there is a ton of stuff I'm going to put up on the screen as we work through and get to one of the punchlines that has resulted in a major player in UK politics resigning. We'll get to that in a moment. But just bear with me for a moment. So just some of the stuff from the files, right? So here, Jeffrey Epstein files reveal a woman named Kathy Roomler was one of the people who had the most communication with Epstein, over 100 emails and more than 50 meetings. She was White House counsel to Barack Obama. Let's take another one. 3 cast members of The View are mentioned in the Epstein files: Whoopi Goldberg, Alyssa Griffin, Joy Behar, and Navarro. Now, there is some horrific stuff being mentioned about Whoopi Goldberg. I'm not going there. You can't verify it. It's not nice. Now, Reid Hoffman, who bankrolled the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against Trump, is featured extensively in the files, visiting Zorro Ranch and Pedo Island, which is Little St. James. That, to me, says very clearly that the reason that he bankrolled E. Jean Carroll is that they found themselves a puppet that they could manipulate, who was a little bit off the planet, which she is. It's obvious what she said with, what's his name on CNN, Anderson Cooper, when she said that rape was sexy. She's a nut job. That they found this woman.
She also developed a dating app that was designed to break people up. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Many
so she's
years
a nut.
ago, yeah. And not only that, George Conway, who was Kellyanne Conway's ex-husband in the Trump administration, Kellyanne Conway was like a major player as far as an advisor. He also helped set up the whole thing with E. Jean Carroll to get Trump as well.
And he's a nut. George Conway
he's
is an
a
absolute
scumbag,
Fruit
too.
Loop on Twitter, the same thing. Now, let's see what else we've got for you. Here's another one that's a massive fall from grace. Now, this was Q. Remember when Q said, people, be careful who you follow? Deepak Chopra is in the Epstein files over 3,000 times. Some of the stuff that he's talking about is absolutely vile. Here's another one. Robin Leach, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, allegedly strangled young girl at a sex party, and that's from the New York Post. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. What does that say to you about entitlement? So that gives you an idea of what's going on. Here's another one
Not
from
to
the...
mention, go ahead. Bill,
Sorry.
Yep.
Here's another one from the Telegraph. And so, sorry, Josh, what I'm not doing is I'm not using anything from the People's Voice. I'm not using Sean Adel Tabatabai. I'm not using Baxter Dimitri. And despite the fact that your Newswire, which evolved into something else, and then the People's Voice, always have stories out there. And a lot of people, even big name doctors on Substack with thousands upon thousands of followers, even Robert Malone, I've known, have shared Baxter Dimitri stuff and People's Voice. I just don't go there anymore and haven't for years. But this is the Telegraph. Bill Gates is very gross. His employee told Epstein, and they've named the woman Melanie Walker, who worked for the Billionaires Charity, apparently complained about the founder to Epstein. How funny is that? Well, not funny, but very, very sad. But Bill Gates was on Australian television last week saying that it was all made up, that the Epstein wrote an email to himself. Maybe he was just trying to harm me, but that doesn't make any sense. So that's where we're going, right? So
Two things.
Go on. Yep.
Two things. Number one, Epstein, there was a lot of talk about people being buried underneath the island and having tunnels on the island.
Yes.
Well, there's now emails that absolutely show that he was indeed, not only did he know about it, but he was worried about things like that. Also, there's now another email that just dropped, I think earlier today, that literally shows that they were talking about his, quote, hanging a day before he, quote unquote, hanged himself, which of course we know he did not. And so now there's almost proof that Epstein didn't kill himself.
There you go. So this is from the Daily Mail statement announcing Epstein's death emerges from the files, but it's dated a day before. That's the actual date there of the statement, giving you August 9. And there's just a little bit more from the article there, and people can look that up. You can check it out on the Gateway Pundit or on the Daily Mail itself, just to give you an idea. Here's another one. So statement announcing Jeffrey Epstein's death emerges from the files, and it's dated one day before, which is quite extraordinary. And you're talking here specifically about the tunnels that are mentioned there, and there are a number of different emails there that reveal where the tunnels are going. I'll tell you what, Josh, we don't convene in terms of production with the collection of the news, but clearly we're seeing the same stories here when we're bringing that up. Now, let's now do a bit of a weave here, because the Clintons, the most pompous, nauseating couple that ever walked the face of the earth, have tried to switch the narrative and said, well, James Comer wanted a private hearing and we said go public. Well, you tried to get out of it until you were threatened with 4 months in prison, and that's when you turned it around and tried to flip the narrative. But the only reason, Josh, that they've gone for a public hearing over a private one is to sanitize the questioning. Because if it was public, you can ask them anything. But when it's private, but when it's public, knowing what Q said about 70 to 95% of staff would make people go to hospital, they now know that they're not going to be able to bring up the horrific stuff, such as the cannibalism that seems to be seeping out into in these particular files. They're not going to be able to ask it. So Clinton colluders, this is just a quick one here. A couple of big names there. George Stephanopoulos down the bottom in terms of what they were doing to help out. So this is part of the reason why Pizzagate was denied. Even Megyn Kelly giving that softball interview to James Alefantis back in the day. Now, going back, Josh, and I know I'm sort of all over the place today, and I don't want to give all the info because we'll be here forever and ever and ever. But in this particular story here, they argue that Pizzagate was debunked when some person went into Comet Pizza to try and determine if there was a basement, but didn't find one. That whole story is bogus. And I'll tell you why it's bogus. The person who went in there was the son of a former CIA staffer. He walked in there with a gun and immediately shot a bullet into the computer register at the front of the place. Now, only a week or two before, there was photographs of people who'd somehow hacked that particular computer and found a hidden menu of what you could actually buy in terms of the horrific stuff that was being sold. So was he going in there to destroy the hard drive, but he never went in there and found anything in relation to a basement, and then they said, well, there's no basement. But the problem with that story was that James Alefantis gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine a few years earlier, and in it he said he canned his tomatoes in the basement, and it was his tomato base was the reason why his pizza shop was so popular in Washington, D.C. Pause there for a moment, Josh. You can see where I'm going with this one. James Alefantis was also voted the 49th most influential person in Washington, D.C. in GQ magazine. Isn't that interesting? How many senators do you have? 100? How many congressmen and women do you have? 400? How does he jump up ahead of hundreds of people owning a pizza shop and actually having influence? And why would he get invited to the White House if he runs a pizza shop? Pizzagate.
Well, think about this, okay? Before the quote Epstein files were anything that we were talking about now or even in the past, and of course I went through and showed a lot of the little black book from a few years ago. But there was another Epstein drop, so to speak. And what was it? It was WikiLeaks Vault 7, if you remember. Because in WikiLeaks Vault 7, when Assange came out with all of the things there, we now knew about not only Hillary Clinton, but we knew about Podesta, right? John Podesta.
Yep.
And we knew about John Podesta's proclivities for weird things like children and pizza and little boys and little girls. And then you had that freak, which I can't think of her name, Marianne, whatever her name was, that was like, she was pictured in like blood and everything else. So clearly,
Abramovich,
a lot of
Marina
what was her name?
Abramovich, Marina Abramovich, yeah.
Exactly. And so that was like the first opening or exposure, if you will, to what later became, I guess, the Pizzagate and the Epstein files. That was the original Epstein files. So now we know for a fact that all that did was just basically validate what we saw years earlier with the WikiLeaks Vault 7 release, which of course I covered extensively back in whenever that was, 15, 16, 17, I don't know. It's a long time ago. But so we knew about that, and we knew about Seth Rich from that. Because remember, they were having a conversation. As a matter of fact, it was Neera Tanden, the big AutoPen scandal person, and John Podesta having a conversation in those WikiLeaks releases. And clearly they were talking about Seth Rich. And Podesta said, well, we need to make an example out of him. And she said something to the effect of, well, what? What should we do? And he wrote back, wet works.
Yes.
Which, of course, is code for assassination. And then we find a few days later that Seth Rich has been shot and killed. But, of course, his laptop was there. His wallet was there. His keys were there. All the things. His cell phone was there. Everything was there. But they called it a robbery, right? Well, of course, you have Ty Clevenger, great attorney, who I'm connected with as well. He's been on that for years, trying to get to the bottom of the Seth Rich stuff. And quite frankly, I think if we keep digging through these Epstein files, we might get some clues.
Well, a couple of things on that. Julian Assange offered a reward for information leading to the information in relation to Seth Rich. That was interesting. Donna Brazil was at the hospital shortly after that had happened, related to the wet work. In relation to Pizzagate, there was also this woman, Tamara Lizzotto, who was a Clinton staffer, who said that her 3 daughters would be waiting in the swimming pool to entertain the guests at one of these Podesta parties. There was the handkerchief
And they
that
were
had
probably
pizza.
like 5.
That's right. There was the handkerchief with the pizza-related material on it, found by the realtor after one of these parties. There was also Tamara Lizzotto mentioning that one of her daughters was going to be a witch in the future, which meant that she was obviously, if you understand this satanic ritual abuse, a child is selected, is abused, goes through this whole process, through this traumatic-based control, and then they become the leader, so it perpetuates. That was the thing. So obviously Lizzotto was told that her daughter was going to be the one that was earmarked to be a future leader, and they're prepared to put their people into this, and that explains why Kanye West has lost his mind and why he keeps talking about how his mother was sacrificed during this whole process. So I know we're going all over the place and we're going over a lot of old material,
That's
but
okay.
it's
I'm
all
sure the audience loves it.
But it's all coming back, right? This is the point. It's all coming back to the surface. Now, I want to now take you. Let me just bring this up here. This popped up yesterday. FBI on record protecting former US presidents, plural, Secretary of State and high-profile celebrities. We all knew this, just confirms it, and this was shared by General Michael Flynn. Internal FBI discussions allegedly show clear and specific guidance to redact images tied to former US presidents, plural, as Secretary of State and major celebrities, not to protect victims, but to protect offenders. Now, every person out there that hates Donald Trump says that, well, there you go. But Secretary of State and presidents, plural, totally points at, who does that point to, Josh?
Oh, absolutely. I would say definitely Bill Clinton, without a doubt. I would say Barack Obama, and of course, Kankles McPantsuit, a.k.a. Hillary Clinton.
There you go. William Jefferson and Hillary right there. Now, if, before I get on to, there's a couple of punchlines I'm going to deliver, but if Jeffrey Epstein is alive, and there's been some AI fake stuff going around, so we haven't got any other confirmation, but there's a lot of speculation, and it's allowed. Whose body was on the gurney?
I don't know. I mean, I typically don't go and do the conspiracy type of things. I know some people like to do that or talk about it or think about it, but I have no idea who that would have been. But, I mean, maybe these files will show something where he's being hid somewhere. Who knows? I mean, look, they have released millions upon millions upon millions of documents, and more are coming. So what they thought never was going to come out, you know, all these months we've been fighting and MAGA's been upset, you know, release the Epstein files, well, guess what, guys? You know, Congress stepped in and said, all right, we're not going to fight about this anymore. We're going to actually come up with a law, and we're going to have everyone sign this law, sign it into law, and we're going to release all this stuff. So again, you know, I'll be honest, they tried to do a head fake, right? When they brought the influencers up and they're holding the binder with all the same stuff from years ago, no new information. They thought it was going to go away. And of course it didn't go away. And then of course Trump got upset and said, this is garbage, you know, stop focusing on that. Let's focus on the victories we have. And I agreed with him at the time. And I said the same thing. There's more important things. But then of course, you know, the House got involved. They passed the Epstein Transparency Act, and here we are. And so who knows? Maybe we will find out that he's, you know, in some European capital somewhere, you know, living it up with you know, Russian whores or something. I have no idea. So I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Well, I did look into it and looked very closely and considered it. Somebody who died 2 months before Jeffrey Epstein allegedly died never had a funeral, not recorded anywhere, right? That guy. Do you know who that is?
Bill Clinton? Wait,
The other guy.
the other guy on the other end?
Yep. It's this guy. Do you know who that is?
I've seen his face before.
That is none other than Tony Rodham, Hillary Clinton's brother.
That was Roger Clinton. Is that his name?
No, that's Tony Rodham. Roger Clinton was Bill Clinton's brother. That's Tony Rodham, Hillary Clinton's brother, right there, who was up to his eyes in all sorts of problems. He had his own criminal stuff. He died 2 months before Jeffrey Epstein and never had a funeral. Now, if you were laying that on a gurney
You got my
and
attention.
he lost a little bit of weight, and you replaced Jeffrey Epstein and you had this guy on ice for 2 months, right?
I mean, I guess anything's possible.
My point is this. If that had happened, right?
They do look alike, I'll give you that.
They do, the nose, the eyes, all that
Correct.
stuff. Now, admittedly, Tony Rodham is heavier than Epstein, right? But he certainly could have lost weight if he had some heart situations that he said he died at
Especially
64.
if he was a corpse
Well,
on ice, filled with
right.
formaldehyde.
But
so
look
he
at that
doesn't rot
nose
away.
line. Look at that hair. Like if you looked at that from a distance, you could confuse that for Epstein on the left there, right? You look at that around the
Maybe,
nose
yeah.
and the
Maybe.
eyes, the hairline, right? Here's my point. If they get Epstein out,
You don't have a side by side, do you?
I have done that in the past, and I just scratched them up just now as we were looking. I have done the side by because I've looked for the ears because his ear looks more like the ear on the gurney, Rodham's, than Epstein's does. Okay. But if you consider, if they get Epstein out because they need him to be in witness protection for whatever reason, or something, I don't know. But if you were to substitute the body for Tony Rodham, who never had a funeral, which means they never had access to his body, aren't you then sending a signal back in 2019 to the Clintons? Not only do we have everything, we even have your brother. So now you know who's in charge.
Did they say how his brother died?
Heart attack, but no funeral. You can look it up. Anyone can look it up right now. Look up Tony Rodham's funeral details. There's nothing on the internet anywhere. I remember when it happened, I was wondering who was going to go to the funeral, so I was actively following that story to find out when it was going to be, because I just suspected there was something suspicious, because he was only 64, and he was gone.
How old was Epstein?
He was in his mid-60s, same age. It's a fascinating story, Josh. That's the ultimate conspiracy, isn't it? If you could substitute anyone, look at that. Look at that. See the ear? I mean, you can't really see it there, but I encourage the sleuths out there, go check out my theory that maybe, just maybe, if Epstein, I mean, obviously Epstein's dead, according to the official story, but if he's not, who was on the gurney? My money would be on Tony Rodham. Some people used to say it was, what was the chef that hung himself? Or Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain. Some people thought it was Anthony Bourdain on the gurney, the guy that said he had information on the Clintons.
They might look alike a little bit too there, but I mean, he was at odds with the Clintons, wasn't he?
That's right. That's
Anyone
that's
that
again
gets
the point.
at odds with the Clintons ends up on a gurney. Somewhere.
Exactly.
That's
Now-
what it seems.
Now I want to go down another dark road, and this is another story that I've been talking about for some time. This is now linking, when you link Epstein to spy agencies in Israel, and this is going to go a little bit cross-haired, and just follow me a little bit here, guys. All right, so I'll give you the full post. Guess who Epstein worked for? We all knew, and the FBI knew too. Confirmed Epstein trained as a spy under Israeli Prime Minister, and the FBI knew all the time. So this is what we're saying. So let me just give you the details. Jeffrey Epstein was represented by Alan Dershowitz. Now, Josh, you know Alan Dershowitz. CHS remembered Dershowitz tells Alec Acosta, the US attorney at the time, that Epstein belonged to both US and allied intelligence services. That means CIA and Mossad at least. He shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein during which he took notes. After these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief. Epstein was close to former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. We know that because Barak was seen going in and out of the New York townhouse and trained as a spy under him. Barak believed Netanyahu was a criminal. Now, park that thought for a moment. Ehud Barak believed Netanyahu was a criminal. Somehow, Ehud Barak's not. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates are allied against Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. One of CHS's who presumably asked questions about Epstein became convinced that Epstein was a co-opted Mossad agent. All right, that's huge statement on its own. They're huge because now you've got the FBI effectively knowing who Epstein is. He's a double agent at least, could even be a triple agent with MI6, and certainly Ghislaine Maxwell and Robert Maxwell, father and daughter, have MI6 connections. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's zoom in on this one. The second paragraph. Harvard professor Dershowitz learned that Dershowitz influenced many students from wealthy families. For example, Josh Kushner and Jared Kushner were both his students. So Jared Kushner was a student of Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz sold CHS. If he were young again, he'd be holding a stun gun as an Israeli intelligence Mossad agent. CHS believed Dershowitz was also co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to their mission. Where I'm going with this.
Right. Well, first off, I think people should understand what CHS means. It means confidential human source.
Yes.
So that means that you're not getting the names of the person, but clearly there's a confidential human source involved in all of this. Look, I've interviewed Dershowitz twice. He endorsed my book,
He did?
mainly only for, selling more books. I mean, it wasn't really for any other reason other than I was trying to sell more books. And I had an opportunity through my publisher to to get him to do a blurb for it, so I took it. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
100%. And my point is here, Josh, there is no connection to saying Dershowitz has done bad or good or influenced you bad or good. But what I'm saying is that this is and what I'm trying to say is this crossing grey area. People say, right, and this is idealist politics. They will say to you, you can't do any of this. You have to separate from it, and therefore you play down this line. All people who are bad, and that's the end of it. And that's where we got destroyed in 2022 here in Australia. We all stood up. We all knew about Pizzagate. We go around and knock on doors and try to get ourselves elected to clean up the Australian Parliament, and we got no votes. And people thought we're all crazy because you can't operate like this. At the same time, the President of the United States gets elected twice officially, and is able to do it in a way keeping his friends close and his enemies closer, playing like the Godfather. And that is the difference. And that's the difference between being down the line, politics is a blood sport and it's ugly and you've got to deal with bad people. Yeah. Interestingly, again, another aside, and I'm all over the place today, Jared Rennick won't work with Pauline Hanson currently, and the reason is that he has an idealistic approach and doesn't like certain people that have done very bad things that are still currently working with One Nation, but from a political perspective, he doesn't like their economic policies and they can't come to any form of agreement, so therefore they're never going to meet in the middle just yet. In the future, things can iron out, etc. But that's taking a very different approach, and from the perspective of former Senator Rennick, he would lose support from his smaller base if he does and then says, I'm just going to go there and get elected and do it. And he says, but I've got no principles at that point. So he's got to maintain a tight approach. So just painting all that there for a moment. And the reason I do this, that there are people that support One Nation that follow me. There are people that support People First that follow me. There are people that support the Liberals and the Nationals that look at my work as well. And they realise that, well, how do we put all this stuff together? What I'm saying is we are working to try and get there. And it is murky and it's dirty and it's dark. But back to this story, Josh, I'll let you go because I want to come around and I want to summarise where I see this as forming, because the Kushner name and Dershowitz and the CHS, plus the fact that Donald Trump is considered to be a confidential informant himself, and that's been brought up many times, even brought up recently by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and then he had to sort of walk that one back. So what's really going on? Josh, back to you.
Well, I think that there's no question that Epstein was working with the IDF. He was working with the FBI here in America as well, and more than likely was working with Mossad as well. And so I think he was an intelligence source, and I think he was an intelligence source in a minimum of two countries, being the United States and Israel, perhaps, as you said, maybe even a triple source at some point. As far as Dershowitz is concerned, I don't know exactly what his involvement was. I know that when I had him on my show, one of the second time, I was told by the publicist that I was not allowed to ask any questions about Jeffrey Epstein. So I told the publicist, who I've been friends with for years, I said, sure, no problem. So what did I do? Well, I kind of weaved my way in. And I said at the end of the interview, one last question for you, Mr. Dershowitz. Out of all the people and famous people that you have represented, what is the one person you wish you never did? And which is the most satisfying one that you did represent, and why? And he brought it up himself. I just threw it out there. I was like, maybe he'll fall for this. Maybe he won't. He's pretty smart. Fell right into it. And he said Epstein. And then he started talking about how he didn't do anything nefarious, and he sued when it made sure that I think it was Giuffre that backtracked, or so one of the people had to backtrack and this and that. So I don't know what his extent is there as far as being a dirty person or not. Maybe, who knows? But I think these Epstein files are gonna keep exploding, and you're gonna see more and more and more people that you're gonna go, holy cow, really, that person too? And I think that there's going to be a lot more of those jaw-dropping moments coming forward. Certainly not going to be me. I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely. Well, the Alan Dershowitz story is so fascinating because many of us discovered him back in the early 90s based on the film Reversal of Fortune, where he represents Klaus von Bülow, Jeremy Irons, and of course played by the late and great actor Ron Silver, played Alan Dershowitz in that film. Yeah. What a terrific actor he was, and tragically lost in his 50s. A bit like J.T. Walsh, another one that we lost in 50, another great character actor.
Another great actor.
And so Dershowitz doesn't come back until, 25 years later, and this whole story, now the man's in his 80s. But it's just a fascinating story. Now, I've talked about it before, and I said after reading Virginia Giuffre's book, she's talked specifically about a certain world leader who was particularly violent and nasty and was yeah, and I said, and that's my suspicion. It just adds up to it, and so therefore,
and I agree with you 100%.
And people will say, well, you're just saying that, again, Jewish people bad. Well, no,
Not all.
bad
Most
bad
are
people
not,
are bad
but
people.
There are a lot.
That's right. Bad people are bad people, and good people are good people. And the whole point is that we're not dismissing based on hanging everyone on the same offence. That's where racism one way or another. But I'm never going to tolerate anyone who's going to tell me that Hitler did a good thing. That is just vile and disgusting, and it makes me want to throw up when I see it. It's absolutely vile. But I think, Josh, that we've covered so much stuff. What we haven't covered yet is another fascinating story, which is to do with the Fifth Circuit. But before I get there, I've played. Actually, did I play the Bill Maher clip today? I didn't play it, did I? About Q. This is the Bill Maher clip. I've just got to play a little bit of this clip. This is Bill Maher talking about how Q, where do they go for their apology?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but where does QAnon go for the apology? QAnon, which believed in lots of really ridiculous things like, Democrats eat babies. Yeah. But they were kind of harping a lot on the idea that the elites are running this pedophile ring. And I made jokes about them. I also made jokes after the Epstein thing happened originally that were on the idea of, obviously there was some smoke there. Well, now with all that's come out in the last couple of weeks, there's a little more than smoke. It does look like anybody who was at all able to get in touch with Jeffrey Epstein, he was the man.
We're doing it.
They just, yeah. And then they.
There you go. I cut that off, but that gives you the idea of what's going on there with Bill Maher. And look, the stories about Whoopi Goldberg relate to the second part. Woody Allen's name's been dropped in some horrific stuff yet again. I don't need to go there. But where I was going now was in relation to deportations and the Fifth Circuit. Let's put it up there, and then I think we'll end the show on video rather than doing it the other way around. But this is the story. The appeals court has backed Trump's mass detention policy. And the point is, Josh, I'm going to get you to fill it in for us.
Yes, this is a major, major victory here, because what this means essentially is that these illegal immigrants actually do not have due process rights, which of course we knew that they didn't have due process rights, right? And so the court system has been clogging up the system for many years. They've been getting in the way. You have all these other activist judges getting in the way, saying that these people need to be in front of judges. You can't just extract them from the country. Well, in this 2-to-1 decision, it clearly says the opposite. And let's not forget, the executive branch runs immigration. And so therefore, based on the Constitution and the legality of immigration based on what we're doing in the Constitution, if this was appealed to another court, eventually this will be struck down at the United States Supreme Court, meaning that due process rights do not exist, never have existed for illegal immigrants. And so the Supreme Court, if it goes to that point, will rule in the correct way on that. Now, the other thing I was going to say is the Reagan judge, the female Reagan judge, she laid it out perfectly. She said, look, just because you've been ignoring the rules and the Constitution for the last 30, 40 years when it comes to deportations doesn't mean that the Constitution doesn't count. And just because you've been doing it wrong doesn't mean that you get to continue to do it wrong. And that's basically what this decision was. It is correcting a wrong decision of over 30 to 40 years of deportations, and now saying, sorry, but you don't have due process rights, and you don't have to see a judge, and we can extract you from this country if you already have an order to be deported.
Well, there it is. It couldn't be simpler. So I'm going to play a clip as we send off for the day, but before we do, we'll just do our conclusions and we'll go. But Josh, it's look, it's firing up on all 8 cylinders now. We are careering towards massive change. The Clintons scheduled to speak shortly. We've got so much happening in terms of judicial decisions making the right moves. Obviously, there's still the hatred towards ICE, the protesting that's going on. Don Lemon, for one, there's more scrutiny facing with what's going on there. Savannah Guthrie, interesting that all of these media characters that were involved are now part of their own stories out there in the main. And meanwhile, the citizen journalists have been promised something from the Trump administration in terms of a whole new idea or a platform of creating something new. Is very, very interesting to see what's going on there. So look, we're putting it out there, and we certainly have done that for a long time. The idea of some of that speculation that you saw with Epstein and Tony Rodham, but you've got to be able to fill the gaps there at the same time. Now, just the last thing before I go, what I wanted to say about the Kushners and that link with Dershowitz, I didn't get onto. I just quickly cover it for you. If Trump was a confidential informant that was able to help Rudy Giuliani bring down the New York crime families, if he pardoned Jared Kushner's father, if Jared Kushner was potentially recruited himself to become a spy, Jared Kushner, married to Trump's daughter Ivanka, is somewhat torn, if you will, between loyalties. And it's very clear that his loyalties lie in the Trump camp and not on the other side of the fence, and that is also illustrated by his work on the Abraham Accords. But there are a lot of people that think that Kushner is dirty, nasty, bad, profiteering, all of the above. Now, he's not a player at the powerful level, but he's certainly an operator helping to get to certain results. So my take is on that is that, again, Trump is unbelievably capable of being able to rub shoulders with his enemies and to get his enemies to do incredible, incredible things that they might not have otherwise done because they have been forced to do it. Compromat and exposure working one way to get you to do one thing and one way to get you to do another. And that results in the final story that I almost forgot. We'll call it the late item, Josh. It's this story right here. No, that's not the one. That's the one about Epstein. It's this one. Morgan McSweeney, the powerful chief of staff for Keir Starmer, has resigned from government. This is his statement. After careful reflection, I have decided to resign from government. The decision to appoint Peter Mandelson was wrong. He has damaged our party, our country, and trust in politics. Why would you quit if that's the case? Out of shame, or is it out of the fact that this is a disaster? The Deputy PM, Lammy, turns on Starmer as well in relation to the US Ambassador Mandelson. Big story, Josh.
Because I don't think Starmer's going to last much longer. That's why.
This looks like the case,
Yeah, it's a sinking ship. They understand that. They're trying to get away from this sinking ship as fast as humanly possible. And let's just hope and pray that, Nigel Farage takes power. Because if he does, then the UK has a chance to save itself from itself. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Nigel Farage, unless he becomes an elected member of office and joins the Labor Party, can't be Prime Minister of the Labor government. But what they can do is obviously have an election, and that would create a big change there. Well, the final clip as we go out, I'm going to play it for you right now. This is Bill Clinton, followed by Barack Obama. And the current president is going to be sitting there giving his opinion along the way. Thanks, Josh. Good to see you. And we'll see you on the next one. Don't forget JBU Show on Substack.com to check out Josh's work. Thanks.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace, as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. When I took office, I committed to fixing this broken immigration system. And I began by doing what I could to secure our borders. But today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. There are actions I have the legal authority to take as president Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. We'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. We expect people who live in this country to play by the rules. We expect that those who cut the line will not be unfairly rewarded. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half-century. And to those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, question my authority, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill